If you're feeling overwhelmed, down, or outright burnt out, I think online therapy at BetterHelp can, well, help you. And you can find out more right this very minute at betterhelp.com/knockback. In short, BetterHelp wants you to prioritize yourself because you are your greatest asset. It's customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. And hey, removing financial barriers is also awesome, as BetterHelp is much more affordable than in-person therapy, matching you with a therapist in under 48 hours. I'm a true believer in the efficacy of therapy. It works for millions of people around the world, including yours truly. And BetterHelp's approach to therapy, removing obstacles and meeting you in your world instead of in theirs, is such a major step towards proving more widely what therapy is all about. It's time for you to try BetterHelp, my friends. Get 10% off your first month of sessions at betterhelp.com/knockback. That's BetterHelp.com/KNOCKBACK. Again, head to betterhelp.com/knockback to begin speaking with a professional therapist in 48 hours or less. Take good care of yourselves, mind, body, and spirit. It's important. For that first component, the all-important mind, consider betterhelp.com/knockback. Knockback, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Knockback. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother Dagan, the White Wolf Moriarty. Dagan, thank you for joining me today. How are you, my friend?
The Dothraki horde of podcasts.
Oh, geez.
Knockback.
We have a little bit of that going on, I guess. You know, you don't know if you want to see me without my shirt on, but I can make that happen. They're much more interesting. I've been reading just the first book. I'm like a couple hundred pages in. They're much more interesting in the book than anything else. There's a lot of differences in the books already.
Wow.
But I've been telling Micah, I've kind of been like rattling the things off that are different in the books. Like, for instance, like Catelyn Stark like hates Jon Snow in the book, like vividly, like overtly, rudely, like hates him. I know she doesn't like him in the story necessarily, but there's just like a lot of differences like around the edges like that.
Wow. Anyway. So Jon Snow's got that bastard hate.
Right. That's exactly right.
From the stepmom.
Also, Tommen is described as being like fat and weak.
Interesting.
And Robb Stark and Joffrey have beef with each other when they visit Winterfell in the beginning of the story, and they fight and stuff like that. There's all sorts of shit.
Oh, interesting. See, yeah. All right. I'm already jealous. Got to start on that journey.
I just want to say before we get into like stretching our legs, as far as that's concerned, I really feel like I'm just not very sharp. And now that I've seen Game of Thrones a couple of times all the way through, or we're working our way, and now I'm reading the book again, I almost feel the reverse about what I would have felt in a vacuum, which is knowing all of the characters from the show, all of the random ass people that they talk about that are in the show, having that visual illustration in your mind while eclipsing what your mind's eye might see is actually quite useful. So in other words, like, I don't think I had the wherewithal to read this shit until like watching, because even watching Game of Thrones again, I'm like, I don't even know what the hell is going on at certain points. And I've seen it before. So, you know, going into the book, it was, I think it's just kind of betraying my lack of focus when I'm reading.
Makes sense. Makes sense when you say it that way. Sure.
Well, Dave, everyone knows Knockback is our retro and nostalgia podcast. We do it each and every week, and you can get it ad-free and early on patreon.com/laststandmedia. Of course, you can also listen on podcast feeds where most of you are. Some of you like to watch on YouTube. That's fine too. You like to watch. So we appreciate you being here with us regardless. But as you know, we like to stretch our legs a little bit before we begin. And, you know, something maybe not topical. I'm just curious if you have anything you want to discuss this week, Dave, as we begin.
You know, I have to pick your brain on something. I was just thinking of this earlier this morning. Comes up because there's a dude at the bus stop that I haven't seen in a while, but I don't want to say I had beef with the guy, but to my extent of having beef with people in the neighborhood, this was like the biggest beef, I think, over the last decade.
Neighborhood beef. Nice. I love it.
Right. So he happens to be the brother, I guess, of the guy who initially owned the house. So up on one of my cul-de-sacs, lives actually right next to Lilia's best friend. And he inherited the house somehow. And then it almost became a joke in the neighborhood because all of his grown children moved back in with him. And there's like that part of the cul-de-sac looks like a parking lot. You know, there's like 8 cars. It's like, and everybody was kind of crying foul. And I didn't really know, they're kind of a little bit of a distance from us, but I also didn't really know them or anything like that. But I guess this was like 5 or 6 years ago. The guy used to walk his dog and let the dog poop on our front lawn. I guess kind of just headed in this direction.
Did he pick it up?
Let the dog go. Yeah, and I think he did most of the time pick it up, but Helene just took exception to it. She was like, that's not what you do. So
no,
I wanted to pick your brain on something, on a couple of fronts, really.
This is so funny bringing this up. I love it. Keep going.
Helene actually got me kind of fired up. And now you guys have to also understand something. We didn't grow up with dogs at all. Now we have a dog. We have Kiki. Kiki will be 5 this year. So I've been a dog owner for a little while. A little bit of experience now, but I never grew up with dogs. So I never really knew the protocol of having a dog, living in the suburbs.
It's true. You got to learn. You got to learn. Yeah,
you got to learn all the ins and outs, the rules, whatever, the unwritten rules, all of these things. So apparently Helene, who did grow up with dogs, always had a dog in her life, even as a little kid, was like, that's not what we do. Now, Helene, I could say, they had like a dog yard, which is like a fenced in side yard where they let the dogs go out through like the mud room of the laundry room and then would wash their feet in like a little basin when they came back in. So the dogs would actually, they didn't walk their dogs. They had a specific dog yard for the dogs. That wasn't the backyard. That wasn't the front yard. That was just cordoned off. So I don't even know how much experience she really has with this because that's the way her family always did it. Right. But now Helene's getting upset, which is getting me upset. Like this dude's walking the dog on the front lawn. So one day the dog's pooping on the front lawn and I run out to the dude and I'm like, yo, like can't do that here. But he's like, well, I'm picking it up. You know, I pick it up. I was like, that's not the point. Like you don't see anybody in the neighborhood doing that. They walk their dogs on their own property type of a thing. And I really kind of got loud with the guy and a little bit aggressive. I was a little out of character. And I kind of felt bad about it. He's an older dude, you know. He's
I always feel bad when I have confrontations too. It's so funny. Yeah, go on.
Did I handle that right? I could have been.
No, yeah, dude. For the next week, I'm obsessing over things like that. Oh, yeah, right? I totally get it. Yeah.
So it's still a little bit. I actually apologized to the guy probably within that 6-month period. You know, like sorry for coming at you like that. Blah blah. And he was fine. But it's still a little weird when I see him, right?
Sure.
And his granddaughter is the one at the bus stop. It's one of his son's kids, and like I said, all of his adult children like moved back in. Some of them have kids, but whatever it is. So now I'm seeing him again, so it's kind of resurrecting this whole thing. And I also found a pile of dog poop on our front lawn. I could have nothing.
Oh, that would infuriate.
Could have nothing to do with him at all.
Yeah.
But it got me thinking. What's the protocol? Like if you have, I could tell you a lot of people in this neighborhood do walk their dogs, but they tend to go to like the walking paths,
right,
through the woods or by the lake, the little pond or whatever. But no, I very rarely see somebody walking their dog on somebody else's front lawn.
No,
right?
Definitely not. No.
So is walking your dog on your neighbor's front lawn when you have your own yard, is that a no-no?
Yeah, definitely. You can't,
even if you pick it up.
Well, there are a few things.
Okay.
I'm not a believer that you can always. I had a fight with a woman in San Francisco when I was walking Lola because she was insisting like you can just have these schedules with these dogs where they poop and pee exactly where you want them to. And I'm like, no, like sometimes she just stops walking and she just takes a shit. Like there's nothing you can do about it. Because she came at me. This woman came in San Francisco. It was the day I was on Joe Rogan the first time. I remember it clearly.
Oh, wow.
She came downstairs and like came behind me and was like, are you going to pick that up? And I'm like, I did. There was like, wetness and like some debris. I'm like, what would you like me to do about that? And this is kind of in the city. I'm like, I picked up the poop. It's probably 99.9% picked up. I'm sorry. Like water or something will wash it away.
It's on the hard surface.
You could have also come back to me. I'm a nice guy where I would have been like, oh, okay, if that's that bothersome for you, I'll come pick it up. But that's kind of the way it goes. And then I told her she was being rude. I was like, all right, you can just call the cops. And then I walked away. But it's so funny you bring this up.
Okay.
Because I'm having a similar issue in my neighborhood with this now, but my situation's different wherein I'm convinced that a woman is letting her dog shit in a public place that all dogs poop and not picking her dog's poop up.
Oh, that's a bad look.
So before I get to that, the thing about walking dogs, and I've learned this especially in suburbia, we have sidewalks and I live in this huge, you've been here, huge neighborhood and all of that. You walk your dogs, they sniff around, they can sniff on people's grass and sniff, but you don't, like the big thing is peeing on lawns, which kills it.
Yes.
And you can do stuff to your dogs like water and stuff to make it less likely to do that. But that's a bigger problem for people. And it's actually why I just took the grass away from around my mailbox, like to just stop anyone from even annoying me like that. But I have these beautiful security cameras. And I've told Micah that because one time before I had one, someone left their shit on my lawn. And I'm like, if someone does that to me again, I don't think people realize the absolute depths of petty that I can be.
That's a bad look.
And when someone does something like that to me, and I told her, I was like, if someone ever does that again, because we have like all of these like 4K shots of them, I'm like, I am going to make signs of them and be like, who is the mystery pooper and all this kind of stuff. And I blow them up and like put them all over the neighborhood. I'm like, do not fuck with me. Like I will make an example of you in 1 second. And I'm waiting for it to happen. However, I have this line of bushes along one side of my driveway and I'm friendly with a lot of the people in the neighborhood and they have dogs. And I let them because they were like, I try not to let them pee on it. And I'm like, you can pee on the bush. I don't care if you pee on the bush. Right. We all just know not to pee on the grass.
Right.
And there's like 4 or 5 kind of public areas. Now this guy has a dachshund in my neighborhood and he has also noticed that there is at least one, if not multiple rogue poopers. And now he's tracking this and I'm tracking it. And it's so funny because I had a confrontation with the rogue pooper not 2 weeks ago, like right before the live show.
Oh,
like,
shit.
The live Sacred Symbol show. Because it was a little awkward because she has like this little shitty dog and she lets it like, run out. Like she lives next to this space. So the dog, no one's to be seen. Right. Okay. And I've done this multiple times. I've seen this dog just walking around. Like other people are like, whose dog is this? She's just roaming around. And the dog definitely poops and pees out there. And that's why they let it out. But then they don't pick it up. And so I took a picture of the dog pooping, right? But then I took another picture. It's actually funny. I got to send it to you. I wouldn't do it publicly. I don't want to out this woman, but like there's a shot where she's like coming around, looking around the corner as I'm taking the picture. So she sees me doing this. And I'm like, what's going on here? And Mike is a little embarrassed or whatever. And she's like, well, I'm going to pick it up. And I'm like, your dog shits all over this. I know your dog is doing it. And she's like, I pick it up. I pick up after other dogs too. And I'm like, you're not picking. And this is literally what I said because I was walking Russian treble. And I'm like, you don't pick up after these dogs. And then she's like, I didn't say I did. And then we had this like really awkward, like, and I'm like, whatever, dude. And so there's always poop. And I think her kids like throw food in the field when they get out of their cars and stuff. So it's just like a disaster over there.
Oh, wow.
And, for dogs, because they're drawn to all of these different things.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm like, so that's it kind of dovetails with the story I was telling you the other week where I kind of want to I want to see if I can just claim that's the space. I wanted to see if I can claim it and just make a fake park that has no permission to exist and try to like get this in order. So it's funny that you bring that up because there is a protocol. Like you walk your dogs, let them sniff. Dogs usually pee most of their pee right away if they have to go. Right. And then they save some and they squirt and all that kind of stuff. And my dogs have a place where they like to poop as well. But like, I'm not worried about people's dogs sniffing on my lawn and all of that. I'll know if someone's dog peed on my lawn because my lawn will die. And then I will blow them up on in a sign that's 5 feet by 5 feet and put it right on my lawn. So I'm waiting for that to happen. But you see, if I was dealing with that situation, do you have cameras?
No.
That's too bad because
really
you have
for the doors.
You have them, that would be awesome. You just have, that's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting. Test me. I'll be on Vistaprint in 2 seconds printing up those signs, my friend.
The public shame is that's a good method, I think. Yeah, you just kind of, you can't run afoul of the rules. There's good form and bad form, with the dog. I just think it's so strange if you're walking your dog onto somebody else's front lawn when you have one. You know what I mean?
I totally agree. I mean, because we had in my backyard, we got all the landscaping redone. The right half of the lawn, you've not seen it, but the right half of it is all wood chips and stuff because the dogs would just kill it if it was Like in other words, we gave them a place to pee and poop so that they don't have to go anywhere else. Like we took the responsibility for our dogs. And then we walk them several times a day, but then they pee on the bushes in front of my house, and then they walk to the various spaces that are for them. And that is the protocol. And I had to learn that over time. I mean, even when we were kids and our friends had dogs and they'd walk them, like, I'm pretty sure they weren't picking up after them, but we were walking them like in the woods and shit. And then when I had dogs, you know, taking care of dogs in cities and stuff like that, you learn over time.
Yeah, you learn the rules, right?
Yeah, it's not. But a lot of people, here's the other thing you can do. Yeah. A lot of people in my neighborhood have passive aggressive signage where it's like, it'll be like a dog with an X through it or something on their lawn or something, or the please. One guy near me has very respectful signs where it's like, please be courteous or something, you know?
Right.
So you can do that too and try, you know.
Yeah, then you know somebody's mindful. Maybe they're watching.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Diligent. And then there's the male dog, female dog thing too, because male dogs. I know there's one of my neighbors has a mailbox that I know dogs pee on. That would bother the shit out of me.
Me too.
That would really, that's pretty heinous, I think, to let your dog do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Just walk the extra
I've had some people do
to
that.
the trail, you know, so let them go on the trees or whatever.
Right. I've had people do that to mine. And then that's why I got rid of the grass around it. But then I also started spraying it with like this patchouli oil, which dogs hate.
Oh.
See, I'm aggressive. Aggressive. Don't fuck with me. Yeah. You have I've given you more than most people will, which is a bush that your dogs can pee on, because the tree doesn't seem to care. It just seems to grow regardless of how many times it gets peed on. So have at it. It likes it. It's weird. It's a weird plant.
Well, I appreciate your input. That's good. It's good to know.
Keep us surprised, please. That's that's big.
Yeah.
Right, well, another thing that's big, Dagan, is Game of Thrones season 6.
What?
This is our 6th episode dedicated to Game of Thrones. This aired in the spring and summer of 2016 on HBO and represents, I believe, the first content that isn't based on books in their entirety. A lot of this now is beginning to be based on interpretations of treatments, I believe, and conversations with Martin and all of the rest. And I think that goes into the next season, which I think this season and season 7 are both based on the 6th book, and then the 7th season's treatment is kind of the 7th season is the 7th book. I think that's what it is.
Okay.
So that's kind of interesting. And I think that you see, in my opinion, season 6 begin to suffer, not from a plot perspective, but I think from a structure perspective. I wrote in my notes this idea that Game of Thrones has the longer there's a relationship, let's say, between the length of time into Game of Thrones, so we're in the 6th season, and how fast they move. So there's a relationship between the quickness that they get through, and we're going to see that even more in 7 and 8, where we have 13 episodes left. That's it. After this,
that's it.
So
yeah,
split in 7 and 6. And so I think that what I'm disappointed with season 6 is that it's very good, and there are a lot of really great episodes. Obviously, Battle of the Bastards and the Winds of Winter are famous episodes of the show. And I really think a lot of it is very well executed, high production values, great acting, wonderful characters, all the rest, really good. But they never settle into a rhythm where I feel like things are happening really quickly. We didn't get a chance to feel out, for instance, Jon Snow and Davos. We didn't get a chance to feel Cersei's pain after her walk of atonement. We didn't really get to know Qyburn very much, but he plays like a pretty important role in facilitating the attack of the Sept and obviously stuff with the Mountain and all the rest. And then we have this, they incorporate Bran. Bran's back, great.
He's back.
And there's really important stuff there considering Jon Snow's lineage. But otherwise, it just feels like, wow, now we're in territory where it's not even George Martin anymore, per se. And I still don't care or understand why this is relevant at all. And it bothered me more because the pacing really suffers because things just happen. Tyrion becomes too close with Daenerys too quickly. Like Jorah is let back in too quickly. There's all sorts of shit where I lament it because it's too good to be rushed through like this. Let it breathe a little bit. Let's explore a little bit. And I know that there are a lot of different theories as to why they started to move so quickly. I think a lot of it had to do with the maybe waning kind of respect the show is getting publicly, and people and actors kind of going their separate ways, and impatience in waiting for Martin to deliver. I don't think they anticipated that they would be doing it like this. So I think there's a lot to be said, but I'm curious what your overall feeling of season 6 is. And if you would share my notion that the quality demonstrably drops now, I think from here, beginning with season 6, and drops again. And then maybe even again. So it's too bad that we're on the backside now. And the only thing that I'm taking solace in, Dag, is having now begun the books, and hopefully maybe I'll work my way through them, and understanding them better and all of that is maybe there'll be a different resolution if he ever does finish them that I'll be able to participate in.
That's hopeful. I like the optimism there for sure.
So talk to me about season 6, however you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, building off of season 5, definitely moving at a vigorous pace, right? Everything's very fast. And like you said, high quality, high production value, great acting. We already love these characters. There's a lot going on. The most interesting thing for me at the top for season 6 of Game is I can't believe how much I forgot. It was almost like watching this season again for the first time. And a lot of things happen, a lot of big things happen, a lot of crazy events over the course of this season as they're hurtling through to season 8. And I could not believe how much I forgot. It really was like, wow, I forgot major things. And it really was, and in many ways, like watching it for the first time, which was really, really interesting. And yeah, I think I was surprised that I come down on the quality of the season being good. I still think it's good, but it's definitely moving at this breathless pace that is, yeah, it's a little bit unfortunate because of the quality, because of the world building that we have, because of these characters, the relationships, the events, everything we want to see play out. Having characters mash up, like we talk about, there's always different mashups and different formations of characters. Some characters are together for the first time, the death of certain characters. So there's so much, dude. And yeah, it does feel really brisk. It really does. And yeah, man, I mean, just bookending the seasons, right? Just thinking how season 6 starts and ends, there's a lot. There's a lot that goes on. And when you look from A to Z, it's like, wow, we got there in 10 episodes, 10 hours. And yeah, man, there's a lot to say. It's going to be hard to know where to start.
That's exactly right. Because I was looking at my notes. I was trying to reflect back on how many notes I've taken. I'm a pretty fastidious note taker, but I took 6 full pages of written notes for the season. On pads like this. And I was looking back, like, Jesus Christ, it doesn't seem like that much should have happened, but it did. And what I think we have to say about it now things start to change with season 6 and 7 as they get shorter, and I think people's patience with it they just want to wrap this thing up. But there's a weird relationship, and I realized this as I bought the book set, is that Game of Thrones, the first book, is 694 pages. Clash of Kings is 768 pages, so a moderate increase. Storm of Swords is 973 pages, the third book. Oh,
wow.
Now, it drops back for A Feast of Crows, the fourth book, to 753. But then with the fifth book, it's 1,056 pages. The reason that I bring that up is because how long is each season? 10 episodes, 10 episodes, 10 episodes, 10 episodes. Between 50 minutes and an hour, 5 maybe. Trending towards 50, really. And so I don't know that they adjusted the show properly in a way where, and especially in this era where I wish that they realized, like, at some point we have to actually start splitting these seasons up. Maybe if you didn't want to do 20 episodes a season, which is a lot, you might want to do 14, split into 7 each, 1.5 and 1 and 1.5, 2 and 2.5, and so on and so forth. Makes sense. So, Dag, I think what ends up happening at this point, and I think why it moves so quickly, is because they're still stuck in this static 10 episodes, right? You're going to get less than 10 hours, maybe 9 hours, 40 minutes total. And they are dealing with longer books. All of the trickle down that didn't reach them from those other episodes and all of those other seasons, and then the shit they have to incorporate that hasn't even been written yet. Dare I say, though we make fun of George Martin for not having finished, that without his organizational chops, that's why the show fell apart. And when they had to start doing it themselves, they couldn't keep the pace. And I think that was a problem. Like they should have been smarter and gotten more out of these stories than what they did. It's disappointing, actually, because you can't really go back and do it again. I mean, I want to save this for when we talk about season, what would be season 8, but there's this idea in my mind. I'm like, are they going to try to do this again? You know, like, because they probably should in the future. I'm not saying now, maybe in the 2030s or something, when things might be done and you can get a better holistic view and realize that maybe you need like 100 1-hour episodes to get through this, you know, or more.
It's reasonable to think that.
Yeah. So that's kind of my theory, my working theory on what ended up happening. They just it's like a snowball going downhill. They just got deluged with shit as they had to keep tight within this range of episodes. And I don't know why HBO didn't let them loose of that. They could have sold as many episodes as they wanted during those seasons and kept the quality high. So it's a little disappointing, but like you said,
always targeting 8 seasons as well, Kyle? That's something I don't know or I've forgotten about.
I don't know. My assumption would have been that they were maybe targeting 7 because it seemed like they were going a book per season. Right. I mean, that seemed like what they were doing until they stopped doing that. So I don't know. I have no fucking idea. And I know that technically the Winds of Winter, which is the 6th book, I think is this season and next season. And then but then there's like 6 episodes to deal with the Dream of Spring, which is the last book. And it's like, that's just not possible. That's why the only heart I take, and I do want to save it for those other conversations. The only heart I take in that I think some of that shit sucks is that it's not real. You know, it's like it's like it's fan fiction almost. Hopefully will be undone. Are you taking good care of yourself? Not only your body, but your mind. If you're feeling overwhelmed, down, or outright burnt out, I think online therapy at BetterHelp can, well, help you. And you can find out more right this very minute at betterhelp.com/knockback. In life, balance is important, yet it's also incredibly hard to achieve. When our lives fall into imbalance, issues can compound, and we can find ourselves ultimately inundated with stress, anxiety, fatigue, and so much more. The reality is that's all part of being human, but what's especially important is using our human agency to right what's wrong, and this is where BetterHelp comes into play. In short, BetterHelp wants you to prioritize yourself because you are your greatest asset. It's customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's 2022, so we don't need to act like it's, say, 1970 anymore. We don't need to go somewhere and see a professional in person just to get the appropriate help we're looking for. By meeting you where you are, BetterHelp aims to widen the reach of therapy to as many people as possible, removing so many barriers that stop people from trying to take better care of themselves. And hey, removing financial barriers is also awesome, as BetterHelp is much more affordable than in-person therapy, matching you with a therapist in under 48 hours. I'm a true believer in the efficacy of therapy. It works for millions of people around the world, including yours truly. And BetterHelp's approach to therapy, removing obstacles and meeting you in your world instead of in theirs, is such a major step towards proving more widely what therapy is all about. It's time for you to try BetterHelp, my friends. Get 10% off your first month of sessions at betterhelp.com/knockback. That's BetterHelp.com/KNOCKBACK. Again, head to betterhelp.com/knockback to begin speaking with a professional therapist in 48 hours or less. Take good care of yourselves, mind, body, and spirit. It's important. For that first component, the all-important mind, consider betterhelp.com/knockback. But anyway, as you said, Dagan, there is a lot to get through, and I guess we'll start with Jon Snow and his resurrection. And actually, we have a letter. Of course, you can write in on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia. We put the topics up and you inquire, and Ryan McQueenie did just that. He says, hey, boys, thoughts on bringing Jon Snow back so quickly in season 6? I thought immediately bringing him back sort of took away the shock of his death at the end of season 5. I felt that way too, although, Ryan, I don't know if it was because I was watching them back to back. So I didn't have that full year between, like, someone ended in 2015 and then picked it up in 2016. It might not have felt so sudden.
Sure.
But I thought you might want to have stretched that out a little bit more, because it seemed when Jon Snow was killed that it was unbelievable, like that it couldn't be. And even though no one is sacred, and we learned that time and time and time again, even this season, it just seemed strange. You also feel bad for him because he was betrayed by the Night's Watch and by Ollie and all these people that he loved.
Yeah.
But then the mix up of all this, and this is where Davos and Melisandre and the remnants of Stannis's not Stanley from Office, from The Office. Stannis's, kind of hierarchy joins with the Night's Watch and Jon Snow along with the wildlings and all of this. And Melisandre brings him back to life. I'm wondering what you make of this and the specific idea of Thorne maybe doing the right thing in some weird way. I think it's challenging to just assume Lord Commander Thorne, or whatever he is now, Ranger Thorne, is kind of like only a bad guy you almost understand in a way, who is Jon Snow. We have the benefit, in other words, of knowing everything. But if you're them, you're like, who the fuck are you, dude? Like we are this 1,000-year order. These are literally the enemies that we're charged with keeping out. I don't, so I think they could have explored that complication more, and bringing back Jon so suddenly, it didn't allow them to explore it. All that it allowed them to do is explore the sadness, I think, that Jon felt of being betrayed, and his willingness to, that the death broke his bond to be, wearing the black or whatever. So what do you think about Jon Snow coming back and how they handled that with Melisandre and Davos kind of befriending him, and Thorne, there's a lot to say. So I'll let you say what you'd like.
Yeah. I mean, really, they could have prolonged that for drama, right? It's pretty unbelievable. I mean, arguably the main character of the series was killed. So already it's like, wow, that's amazing. And to actually bring him back from the dead is pretty crazy to start the 6th season off that way. I mean, Jon Snow was dead. Now he's alive again. And this is one of your main characters. So you're kind of wondering what that entails. And I love sort of what you said about Alistair Thorne and sort of that sort of the Night Watch is the Night's Watch is kind of divided into two factions. One under Jon and Davos and their side, the wildlings, and then Alistair and Ollie and everything on and probably the main body of the Night's Watch on the other side. And I think it was a case of each side doing what they thought was right. I mean, Alistair Thorne even says that, he believes Jon was doing what he thought was right, but that's why by allowing the wildlings in and everything, they kind of Jon thrust that decision on them, that was what they felt that they had to murder him. And that, I love the drama. I love that sort of that inner feud that's going on behind the wall, the Night's Watch, that this is going on. And they have this very small pocket of people with Davos, Melisandre, and a few other guys, and Jon's wolf versus everybody else in the Night's Watch. So it's a great way to start off the season. And also having the whole thing with Melisandre, which I totally forgot about, where she kind of reveals her true form, that she's this old crone, this old hag, that, when she takes off that enchanted necklace, that choker, I guess is the source of her power.
Get them saggy breasts. Saggy
Dude,
old breasts.
That scene really got under my skin. It was late one night. I was watching it. It was like around midnight. And I felt like, whoa, like when did Game of Thrones sort of mash up with The Shining, the hag in the bathtub from The Shining? And yeah, like I was like, oh my God, that's her true form. So she's ancient.
Yeah, it's super cool.
She has to kind of concoct that power.
It's her like choker.
To look that way. I think that choker.
And we meet another red woman later. I don't know who she is, but we meet her, I think, on Meereen, right?
Yeah.
And she has the same choker around her neck. And I wonder, are like they all old? Is it known that they use that to kind of hide I love that. And
so cool.
Because you assume that either that's like their most beautiful version, or they're projecting what they see as like the most attractive version. Because the other red woman's hot too. Like, are they all sexy? Because that's kind of the way that they're most effective in the world, though they get older and kind of settle into a life over hundreds of years, kind of like a vampire in some ways. So I really like that too. You're right on that. And I dig that you brought up the I was trying to figure it out. Like they're locked into this space in Castle Black, Davos, a few loyalists, Melisandre, Jon's body. And they're like, it is interesting. I actually love one of the Davos signs. I think, or quotes when he says, he takes out his sword and he's like, I'm sorry for what you're about to see, which is cool. I love that character so much, even more this time watching it.
Lovable dude.
And so I like that they're kind of stuck, and they're given till sundown, and this battle rages on. But of course, the wildlings come to the rescue, and Tormund and all the rest, and Dorne is forced to surrender. I am curious, like, what would you have it's hard to say this. I mean, it's fiction and it's also like in hindsight, but do you think you would have been on Jon Snow's side or Thorne's side? Because I think Thorne's argument was that there shouldn't be any like cults of personality with the Night's Watch. It's just an order. And
right.
Jon Snow is this guy who's kind of like changing the nature of it, changing what it is. Can we ever go back? What would have the Grand Maester even thought if he was still alive as well? And so there's a lot of interest. I'm just interested in this kind of moral grayness that maybe they will explore in the books, where you can kind of see Thorne's side. Like later on, when the Brotherhood are executing those guys, you see their side to why they do it. But then when the Hound wants to like do it brutally, they have like a rule. They have rules and all of this. So what do you make of that?
It's really cool to examine it from both perspectives, because you're dealing with ancient biases, long-standing, centuries-old feuds between the Night's Watch and the Wildlings, and all this animosity that's been brewing for years, and these ancient hostilities. But after the Battle of Hardhome, I would say it was probably the message was sent, right? It was clear that there's a tidal change in the world that's happening. And I think it sort of requires you to evolve. So the Alistair Thorns of the world have to kind of get hip to the fact that there's a new enemy brewing, and the whole world has to unite against this, horrendous threat. And I think that's what's at play here. It's like trying to evolve past everything you were raised with, everything you dealt with. You and your father and your father's father and his father before, they've all been dealing with the wildlings, right? It's always been this ancient order of the wall dealing with the wildlings, trying to protect. This was the realm that was like to protect mankind. And, now everything is shifting with this army of the dead. And it's interesting to see who could kind of evolve to that mindset of like putting aside ancient grudges and hostilities and sort of bonding to and uniting against a common foe. And Alistair and his people just couldn't get there. Dorne just couldn't get there. And Jon, is it that Jon's younger? Is it that he's more intelligent? Is it what he saw? He was a little less sheltered. After Hardhome, I think, after that battle, I think that was the changing of the tide.
Yeah, that's a good point. The thing about Dorne is that he's not a coward, and he's not, he fights and all this stuff. So you want to like him, but he makes it really kind of impossible, because if we can identify a protagonist, I would assume, a main protagonist, I would assume we would say it was Jon at this point, particularly towards the end of the season.
Sure.
All right, let's try to keep going and make some order of these other characters, or make some sense of it. We got a lot of Ramsay Bolton in this season. I like when he's going over the body of his deceased girl, and he says, he's talking about how he's going to feed her to the dogs, and he says to her, "I wish you could be here to watch." And then his dad tells him a reckoning is coming, that the Starks are getting stronger, that they're getting weaker. And Ramsay's position is obviously questioned, as Lady Walda, the obese Lady Walda, has a baby boy. And though Ramsay is now officially a Bolton, he's not full-blooded. He is a bastard, in quotes, depending on how you might interpret it. And so I'm curious what you think of Ramsay Bolton. I mean, it's a big question in this season, but what do you make of him?
Oh, man. I mean, he only doubles down on that insanity, brutality, right? He murders his dad, murders his stepmom, murders the heir to Winterfell, right? Walda's son, via Hound, right? He sets the hounds loose on the poor woman and baby. Yeah, dude, it's unbelievable. That in what I love about Ramsay in this season is Sansa trying to brief Jon about who he's going to be dealing with and how crazy he is and how he's not the one to really fall into traps. He's the one to set traps. And just trying to get Jon to understand the level of insanity that he's going to be dealing with. And then, of course, when they get to the Battle of the Bastards, and we'll get to this, and Ramsay does what he does with Recon, just to enrage Jon. And you're like, yeah, that's proof positive of everything you're dealing with a foe like Ramsay Bolton. And it's amazing because you're thinking about, is there going to be no end to the misery that this guy wrought on everybody? It's unbelievable. And he's a proper foe. You could see him. We compared him to Joffrey in the past, but with Joffrey with the tools to get things done. And sort of, I don't know, not real. In a way, I guess there is some cowardice there that we see, but a brutality, just a real, like a sheer brutality will stop at nothing.
Psychopath, total.
Absolute psychopath.
Yeah. And I dig it. Like, he becomes a little much this season because they really do focus on him a lot. And it's like, it kind of gets frustrating because he's definitely, in my mind, not one of the strongest players, but I do like having this world seems really dark and unforgiving. Westeros in particular seems in its own way dark and unforgiving. We learn later on in the season, actually, that Westeros abolished slavery centuries ago while slavery is still being practiced across the narrow sea. So obviously in some ways it's more progressive, but there seems to be in other places more order and peace nonetheless. And there's a real sociopathy in Westeros with everyone. And it's cool to have a character like Ramsay that is just the encapsulation of that. Like you said, kills his own father, who gave him a name and all of this kind of stuff. Really works in very unintelligent geopolitical ways and who they're betraying and how they're working. And it's cool that he's like a slasher villain almost. And for some reason it works because it just brings like a different horror flavor to it. Like the flayed man and like the willingness to just do what's necessary. The one thing that I'm confused about, and I'm curious what you think of this, is that this is also, I think, the greatest, outside of maybe like what the slavers are doing, the relationship that Ramsay has with those around him is peculiar. Like, why are they following this guy? I don't understand. Like, if I were a lord of a house and small house, and I would be like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, we can't trust this dude. This dude just killed his own father. Now he claims that he was poisoned, but that's no one believes that. And because they've seen his behavior over and over again. It's like kind of an echo of Joffrey's behavior in King's Landing when he's like cutting dudes' tongues out and all this, and people, and in front of everyone. It's like, what are you doing? Why would people fall in line behind you other than fear? Did you play around with that idea at all? Like, what are these guys doing? Like it seems like so different compared. I know the Starks are the heroes and all that. I'm sure that they have their bad parts too, but it just seems so different from the Starks and like what they're used to. And they say over and over again that they remember the Starks. So I don't know. It's strange to me. What do you think of that?
You do think of that because Ramsay has amassed this massive following, an army by this point. And you're like, wow, why are these guys following him? You could definitely think out of fear, but you could also think maybe because Ramsay is going to get it done. That if you're going to align yourself with somebody, do it with somebody with a track record. He's murderous. He's got this following. There's probably a large contingent of those backing Ramsay that just think that's the guy to follow because that's who's gonna emerge victorious. But then you could also, certainly, I'm sure there's some fear involved there with certain ones as well. But that's probably what it is. But you do think that because he's got a massive army at that battle. He's got a lot of backers.
Yeah, about 6,000 men at the Battle of the Bastards, which we'll talk about in a little while. But we have to incorporate some other characters into this too. Sansa plays a major role in this season. She finally accepts Brienne's desperate attempts to declare fealty as this woman just declares fealty for everyone she meets. But I love Brienne. She's awesome. And it's relieving. It's like steam out of the kettle a little bit for me when they finally get together. It's like, oh my God, I just want Brienne and Sansa to be together. Let's just get this over with. Not from any other thing, but it just, you belong together. It's nice. And actually, Angel de Jesus wrote into us, de Jesus. He says, hello, brothers.
Hello.
My question is simple. How fucking awesome was it to see Sansa stop being such an annoying pissant this season? Her leaving the hounds to devour Ramsay was the most satisfying moment in all of Game of Thrones for me. My love for her was cemented here in that scene, or there in that scene. Thank you, Angel, for writing in. Yeah, it's finally, and I wrote here in the top of my notes, it's like Sansa has been through the ringer, like truly through the ringer. She's annoying because she's a little passive. She seems like she's a passenger a lot. She should be in more control. Like we see an example of a powerful woman in not only in Cersei, obviously, but in Marjorie. Like take a little bit of control of your life and do something about it. So I think she's been victimized to such a degree, in part because of her own hesitance in acting. But that is all thrown off in this season, which is nice to see. In fact, I love when they are parlaying with Ramsay and she's the one that says like, we'll see you tomorrow, you know, and rides away on her horse. Nice long, distant shot of that actually, which is cool. So what do you make of Sansa this season and Brienne and Podrick and Theon? I mean, they're all kind of brought together. Theon then goes in his separate way, which is cool to kind of watch him reclaim who he is as well. But talk to me about Sansa and her arc this season.
Yeah, it's nice to finally see this character get enough power to help herself, right? Because she's been the victim for the better part of 5 seasons. And she's been, as you said, through the ringer. I mean, she's been brought along, tortured. I mean, she's gone through agony. And there is a little bit of that annoying aspect to the characters. Like, come on, just rise up, you know, try to help yourself, give yourself a leg to stand on. And she finally does in this season. And even to the point of feuding a little bit with Jon about how they should approach things and how they should approach Ramsay and how they should go about this battle and getting Winterfell back and all of these things. And you know, right from the beginning of the season, when Theon and Sansa are on the run from Ramsay's host, and then in comes Brienne and Podrick, you got this foursome, right? Theon, Sansa, Brienne, and Pod. And again, it's like that mashup of characters. It was so unnerving because I forget as they're going through the snow, Theon and Sansa are running from the hounds and they're going through the snow and they're crossing that icy river and everything like that. I really did forget what happens there as they're kind of caught again. And that's when Brienne and Pod come through to save the day, and Theon a little bit too. And it's interesting. It's really, it was a really cool way to start the season. I felt like I was on edge maybe more over the course of this season than any prior season that we've talked about yet, Kyle. And that was part of it, was making sure Sansa was going to escape from Ramsay. And then, of course, get reunited with Jon, which happens. And you're just so happy that she finally seems to have a head on her shoulders and she finally has some volition to speak for herself and act for herself. You know, she's grown up the hard way for sure.
Yeah, she really has. And I agree with you. It is good to see her take the reins. It is frustrating how long it takes. And that is its own thing. But yeah, she comes into her own. I like the different combinations of characters. We really stressed that the last couple of episodes, I think, too, where we see everyone kind of mixing up. It's nice because I think about that from just logistical points of view, because the show is filmed from all different parts of the world. So you assume some of these characters would just never really be around each other because maybe they do table reads and stuff. And obviously they meet for conventions and all of that. But yeah, I just like the idea of these different actors getting exposed to these different people, and Stannis being let go so he can go get out of here. Doesn't have to be here anymore. So with, and by the way, because I'll probably forget to bring it up later when we talk about the Battle of the Bastards, Sansa, as was noted in the write-in, letting the hounds eat. Ramsay Bolton was awesome. Very vivid what they show. And I love how the dog's like kind of sniffing him first and all of that. It's like very, very, a lot of horror elements coming to play here, which is cool.
She stops and watches for a little bit. This is a new Sansa.
What about, going down my notes here, we have Jaime. We have to talk about Jaime arriving back in King's Landing with Myrcella's body. I'm a little confused. Why didn't they turn the boat around and go back and be like, what the fuck did you just do? Like, what did you do here?
Yeah.
Maybe they felt like they were outmatched or whatever, but it was an interesting move because they find out like in the harbor. So it's not like they could have just turned around. So they kind of just ate it. They come across and Cersei discovers Myrcella is dead. And there's massive upheaval in Dorne in the meantime. They kill the peace-loving prince and the guard, his black axe-wielding guard. I like that character a lot. He was cool. Wish we got to know him a little bit more. Because like I said last time, he says something to Jaime like it would have been a good fight if you had both your hands. So it seems like they are hell-bent on revenge, that they feel like the response was to all that has happened, because it's not just Oberyn, but it goes even further back to what Oberyn himself was trying to kind of seek revenge for with his sister and what the Mountain did and all this other stuff. This is strange just because I feel like it moves too quickly. I'm not crazy about that character. What's her name? Is it Trystane? No.
Oh, Alaria-san?
Alaria, yeah, Alaria. Yeah. I'm looking at my notes here. Yeah, I'm not crazy about that character. Like, I just find like she's a weaker player, and it would have been nice to. I understand she's still in the story, but after Oberyn dies, it would have been cool to kind of see her go away. But we have these female fighters, which are really cool. They use the different weapons, a whip and a sword and a staff and all of that. I love the idea of the whip. Obviously, invokes Castlevania, which is cool. But what do you make about all of this going on in Dorne? Because they really do keep coming in and kind of checking in on this. Of course, I wonder if what this would have looked like in the books and probably been much better fleshed out. I wish we got to know that. What was it, Doran? No. Yeah. I wish we got to know him better. I think that's the guy I'm thinking of. Yeah. We don't really seem to get to know him better. Like, what does a peace-loving person in this universe look like? Someone that cares about his people, the prosperity, and talks about feeding them and clothing them. And it would have been nice to see someone that wasn't so just so power hungry and autocratic, not wielding his power to hurt anyone necessarily, not even seeking revenge, realizing that. I think he says something like violent. There's something, he says some quote. I don't know if I wrote it down about violence, but I'm wondering what you think of that whole arc. I wish they had spent, again, talking about the pacing of the show. I just wish they spent more time there, because it would have been cool to kind of get to know Dorne. Because when he dies, we care, I guess, but it's not that much. I mean, we got to spend 10 minutes with him basically.
Yeah. I mean, it sets up Alaria-san and her sand snakes taking control of Dorne, sort of doing away with Prince Doran, his faithful, his son, Prince Trystane, is also killed by the Sand Snakes. So it's a power play for them to take over Dorne. And then it kind of sets the table for Dorne and later on with Olenna Tyrell, Dorne and the Tyrells to form an alliance, which happens later on in the season. Which you can imagine is going to be against, setting themselves against the Lannisters, because now they both have proper fuel for revenge against the Lannisters and Cersei and everything like that. So it's interesting. And of course, the power play started with poisoning Myrcella. So they knew, I guess those wheels were already kind of set in motion. It's true, though. Dorne is kind of a side story, and we never really know too much. And we don't know too much about Prince Doran and everything like that. So, and it just seems like that type of character is just not long for this world. It's just way too cutthroat for a guy like this. Yeah,
it's annoying that we don't learn more. Like, there's a lot of intrigue. It kind of has like this Mediterranean Arabic kind of feel to it.
Definitely.
And it would have been cool to kind of explore that from many different angles. Because I you're right. In seeing it again and then reading the depth the books go in, which again, I'm very early in the first book. Still, or not very early, but early in the first book, so I don't know how it gets. But I doubt it's reflected this way in the books. And I feel like if they wanted to just pick and choose, they should have been, again, wiser in the way they picked and choose, or just given them more time to explore all this stuff. I just don't get it. The other thing that I wanted to touch on as we move forward is we get a lot of, or much greater look at Arya, and we find her living a poor, blind beggar's life, and this random person with no name is kind of attacking her and trying to get her to succumb in all of this. And she's eventually brought back into the fold and given a task that has to do with this actress that kind of goes forward many episodes in this season. What do you make of the Arya plot? This idea that she does find herself eventually at the end of this. She understands she never totally loses herself. She hides her sword and all of the rest and goes and reclaims it, but she just is not made to be a person with no name, the many-faced god, all of the stuff that faith demands. She's just not cut out for it. And it's cool to see her go through those trials. And later on, towards the end of the season, we realize it's kind of like the Sith, where not that she's a Sith Lord, but where it's like she learned how to use this stuff to a different end. Not that they were using it for a good end, but they had this order and this history and all that. And she just kind of took what she knew from them to use and is going to use it on her own outside of the demands of the many-faced god. So what did you think about Arya this season as she tries to go home, she gets caught up, not able to go home, but she's finally going to return an adult, kind of a grown woman?
Yeah, it's at this point with Arya, you're really wondering if her dedication to the faceless men, the House of Black and White, is it really worth it? She gets her eyes taken away as punishment for murdering Sir Meereen, right? That wasn't on the docket. She kind of flew ahead of the rules of the House of Black and White, and when it had to pay for that. It was interesting with the waif character, who's like the assassin, the faceless assassin that's constantly pursuing Arya through this season, like Michael Myers style, right? It's very nervous. And, I love the one scene where Arya just goes and gets her sword, goes and gets Needle, and sort of reclaims her identity. And I mean, in that one action is saying that she's rejecting in many ways the faceless assassins and the House of Black and White, and she's going to do it her own way. And then when she's being pursued by the waif and she slices the candle and is kind of, I guess, gets the better of the waif off screen, and then returns to Jaqen and says, like, I'm finished. And she takes the face of the waif character. She wins. She emerges victorious, and she basically gets her freedom. She basically earned her freedom, and I guess Jaqen's respect. You're really wondering what's going to happen at that moment. Is she going to be free to leave? Because Jaqen was the one who set Arya, who wanted Arya's life. He's the one. He's the one who set the waif on Arya to murder her when she didn't go through with murdering the actor from the touring actor troupe or whatever. Or the actress, I should say. So that was an interesting resolution for Arya. And through the whole thing, too, of being sort of plied with bribery of, well, if you do this, we can restore your eyesight. If you do this, and she kind of resists, and she keeps going on her journey until finally she reclaims her identity and breaks free of the House of Black and White, which, thank God, something positive happens for one of the Starks.
Yeah, no, totally. It's interesting. Like she spends all this time running away from who she is, and then she realizes that she needs to embrace who she is, that she's been away far enough, hiding far enough, for long enough, trying to get away from this pain. When you really think about what Arya's been through from the very beginning, it's just a series of horrors. I think about that over and over again. That's why the show moving so quickly just doesn't settle on a lot of it, or even let us feel the depth of the suffering of a lot of the different characters. I talked about a couple of seasons ago. I felt that way with Jaime when he's in captivity, both before and after he loses his hand. Like, we don't really see, he's in captivity, I think, for like more than a year. We don't really see very much of it. So
yeah,
again, all about that pacing. All right. So let's go to visit with Daenerys now and Meereen. She is with this horde now. Drogo's widow. She kind of tries to manipulate them at least, and she's brought to this place where the widows are kept, and she ultimately burns the building down, and and has like her second or third moment of being the queen of the flames or whatever she wants to say, whatever her fucking long ass title is. So Daenerys, to me, I like the new focus on this side of it. I'm not quite as intrigued by it as I am other parts of the story, but I think Tyrion ending up with them is pretty cool. And again, just too quick. Like he's like, you blink and he's the advisor of this queen. Although she seems to take a lot of various advisors in, so maybe that's not that big of a deal. But ultimately, she reunites with the dragons. She staves off this attack from the various masters of Yunkai and all the other places that are fighting her. The dragons kind of lay waste to them, and she's by the end of the season ready to kind of abandon Meereen to the people. Doesn't seem like she's even really willing or interested in holding it, which is in itself interesting. I guess she doesn't want to build a multinational empire, but nonetheless, what do you think about Daenerys in this season, and what do you have to say about her?
Yeah, she's got quite an arc this season. I mean, she gets captured by this Dothraki horde, and you're kind of wondering in the beginning, Daario and Jorah sort of staging this rescue, and you're wondering how that's going to work out. It's very Indiana Jones style, like against all odds type of rescue that they're setting up, no weapons and all that kind of thing. But you're wondering for Daenerys, like, is she going to tell this Dothraki horde like her history? And she finally does. And she finally says, like, look, I'm Khal Drogo's widow, and you're wondering if they're even going to believe her or they even know who Khal Drogo is. But it turns out that, okay, yeah, they do believe her. They embrace her. But they say at the same time, like, you're supposed to be in this place where the Dothraki widows go. There's a home for you. And if you're accepted there, that's going to be your life, or else it's going to be a lot worse if you're not accepted there. So then you're worried for her. It's like, wow, she's got to be basically holed up with these other Dothraki widows for the rest of her life in this one place. And, she does her best Targaryen asbestos fireproof thing, and she burns the entire place down and emerges from the flames unscathed. And, I was really worried for her in the beginning of the season. And she basically comes away, claims this other Dothraki army. Now she's got them. She's got the Unsullied. She's got Yara Greyjoy and a big part of the Ironborn fleet. And she's heading for Westeros. Unbelievable.
Yep. Well, and we'll touch more on some aspects of the story as we move forward. I'm trying to go linearly as I can, but it's hard,
it's
man.
Tough. It's tough.
We're jumping around, obviously. We're introduced or reintroduced to Bran in a major way, like I said. Random tree man. I don't really know what's going on. I don't really quite get any of this arc at all. In fact, I'm not entirely sure who. Someone wrote in, the champ actually said, did you figure out who Jon's parents were before the reveal? And he talks about how Oberyn gave a big hint and all of the rest, but I actually don't really quite understand still what's going on here, other than that Ned Stark never did anything, and to hide the existence of this child's true origins actually took it on the chin, which to the beginning of what I was saying at the beginning about Catelyn Stark in the book, that's what makes it all the more notable, is that he really didn't do anything wrong and was willing to just hide it and act like he had a mistress and all that when he was really true. But nonetheless, I just find this weird. I feel like I'm missing something. I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, who are these random Babylon 5 characters? Like, they don't look like they belong in this at all. They really do look like the syndicated 90s alien that you would find on one of those shows.
Yes.
And obviously it all goes to shit for them and they escape, and we find out more about Hodor, which we'll talk about, but I'm lost here with this whole, the usefulness of all of this. And now without even George Martin's guiding hand, it's kind of gotten worse. I don't, from the very beginning, I do not understand in the story and reading and all this, like Bran's entire arc seems like they could have just cut it out. He climbs and he falls and hurts himself. He sees the Lannisters doing what they're doing and all of that, but it just doesn't ever seem to matter. Like if it takes books and books and years to matter, I guess that's cool, but it's a distraction and a waste of time when I'm more interested in this other stuff. So I'm kind of lost with this whole dreamscape thing and all of this. I don't know. What do you have to say about it?
It's very odd. I mean, this part of the season sort of enters a very strange, never-ending story / Dark Crystal / Labyrinth thing with the Children of the Forest, and then Max von Sydow playing the Three-Eyed Raven. And, you know, he's sort of like this guy, half man, half tree. He's like a 16-bit video game boss or something. It's really strange. It enters, I mean, just visually, from a visual standpoint, aesthetically, it's very strange because now it's entering into like almost like fairies and this type of thing, which Game of Thrones wasn't really touching prior to this. So it gets very odd. And then we find out the Children of the Forest are the ones who basically created the White Walkers as a defense mechanism against, I guess, encroaching mankind. But then it ran afoul, like they couldn't handle it. You know, it just grew too large and too uncontrollable and became something that they couldn't lord over anymore, which is really strange. And then that whole thing with, you know, I guess with the Bran character, it's supposed to be the type of thing where he's inheriting this Three-Eyed Raven capability, which is supposed to be some kind of seer that you could basically analyze the past so you could cut your way into a more positive future, right? Learn from the past so you could make amends to, I guess, creating a better future is, you know, for argument's sake. But it's very strange, and it does feel a little hokey with the whole cave and the Three-Eyed Raven and the Children of the Forest, and they're throwing their little explosive forest bombs and all that kind of thing. It feels like something else when season 6 sort of enters that domain. It feels like you're watching a different thing before you cut away to Jon Snow or back to Meereen or with the Hound or wherever else you're going to go. It definitely feels like you're watching two shows. And I wonder if that was as intentional as it came out, because it feels goofy.
Yeah, I agree. You're right. It feels almost like George Lucas or something, like Gunga bombs and all this kind of stupid shit. Like, I don't. And what's disappointing about it, especially the way you explained it, which I think really encapsulates why I'm disappointed in the whole arc, is, okay, the White Walkers were created by these people and they lost control of them. So it's like Skynet, like the Cylons, right. Like there's so many stories like this, and we're going to even bring it into fantasy where we lost control of the super weapon. It's like, okay, that sucks. That's not an adequate answer for me at all, and kind of ruins it. Like, I thought they were supernatural or crazy. Like, I still don't know. I don't remember anything about the kings that we see, like the different ghost white kings or whatever. But I had this vision in leading up and I still don't really remember exactly what happens. But they're like these long dead, you know, they want their territory back, or there's some sort of ancient grudge or anything but that. It's like, oh my God. I totally forgot about that. And it's not even clear. And I wonder if they added the dialogue, because they show them shoving the knife into like a person and turning them into but then they're like, you made the White Walkers or whatever. Like, they have to like be very literal about it. And I just find that to be inadequate and disappointing.
Exposition.
So it's not only Bran being boring, also Bran just having grown. He looks like he's 40 years old in this season.
He's looking a little awkward.
But so it's not only a distraction from what's cool, but it kind of ruins the intrigue at the wall. It's like, okay, these things are wild. They're just attacking. They might have some plan. I don't really know, but they were created by these Babylon 5 creatures. It's like, oh, all right. If that's the way you feel. Now, I do want to touch on some of the visions, specifically with Hodor. Wet Willie wrote in and said, hey, Brothers Moriarty, there was a lot of deaths in Game of Thrones that made me sad, but none more so than Hodor's death. To see Hodor as a fully functioning kid, then see him somewhat his violent transformation into being able to say one sound, to finally seeing his life come to an end, fulfilling his destiny that was set for him, was heartbreaking. It's also one of the few deaths we don't actually see, but know to be true. Hold the door. Yeah, I remember them finally getting into Hodor. We all love Hodor. And we meet him as Willis, a stable boy.
Right.
And I don't know if he has like a seizure or something happens where he kind of loses his ability to speak. And when we see that happen, and so all he ends up saying is Hodor, Hodor, Hodor over and over again, which comes from hold the door, like was said. What did you think about his end and kind of him braving the, closing the door and getting ripped up? It seemed weird to me just because once that door opened, it wouldn't have been, it seemed Benjen later comes and saves them, but
right.
It doesn't seem like adequately far away, like where his death was almost for naught. They were all going to die anyway, but he tried to do what he could. And it was sad to see him go, though we never hear anything of him. It is cool to see him as a kid, very Lost-like flashback.
Yeah, that was cool.
But yeah, talk to me about the Hodor arc, as small as it is.
Yeah, those Three-Eyed Raven flashbacks. I mean, that's one of the things with Hodor. We see Lyanna, we see Arthur Dale, the sort of the morning. We see a young Ned Stark. So those little glimpses back into the past Westeros is kind of neat. And seeing Hodor as a kid, yeah, that was kind of touching. And the whole thing with him, that Hodor thing being explained as hold the door, and that's when he meets his end to save Bran and Mira's life. So that's interesting that it was like this foreshadowing moment, and that he basically became this shell of a man who we knew was a normal kid at one point. So yeah, that was cool to get a little history on a character like Hodor. So that's one positive thing that Bran did this season.
Yeah, indeed. All right, we haven't talked about the Lannisters too much apart from Jaime coming back, and then we kind of got distracted by Dorne. But talk about Tommen and Cersei and the High Sparrow and all of the rest. Tommen's cowardice really frustrates me. Like, I don't understand why he's so doughy and all of this, considering where he comes from and the people he was surrounded by. It's not to say he's kind and good, and that's nice, but it's almost too much. Like, take some control. You are the king,
right? You
don't have to do this. It's your mom's fault that this all happened, although you might be unaware of that. But you can still take control, free your wife, free your wife's brother, and figure this out. Now, they attempt to do so. In fact, we see that goofy ass Tyrell guy, I guess, the Queen of Thorns' son or whatever.
Yeah, Mace.
And he's in his armor and stuff, and it's just absolutely outrageous. That character's outrageous. I love that character so much. He looks like, I don't know if I said this, but he looks like one of the people in like Munchkin Land.
He does.
He
totally
Wizard of Oz. He totally, like his mustache is just straight up Munchkin Land shit. And then not that there's anything wrong with that, of course. And we see like we don't get because Marjorie dies in the explosion at the Sept, which is nuts. We don't really get resolution into it, and at least in my opinion, into if she was reforming or not, or like trying to manipulate shit. She hands that weird picture of the rose over to the Lady of Thorns, but she seems to be like quite up on scripture and friendly with the Septa and the High Sparrow. So we don't really get resolution from that, which is unfortunate. But you think Tommen would lean into things a little bit more and free these people. And I like the whole arc. Like I said last episode, I love the whole arc of exploring religion and religiosity and theocracy and all the kind of stuff that they're doing here. And I think it's awesome. Like we said, Jonathan Pryce is amazing in that role as the High Sparrow.
Yeah. So good.
But even then, I feel like it's not thoroughly explored enough. Like there's so... at the end, when Daenerys leaves Meereen, she kind of indicates that there's going to be like a republic there. People are going to choose their own leaders and all of that. And here, so that's like one opportunity to explore something different. And here was an opportunity to explore theocracy that was kind of taking hold, not through the king becoming a theocrat, but by the theocracy taking control of the king, which is kind of, I think, still a shadow of, like I said last time with Protestantism and Catholicism. I think there is a little bit of that here with Catholicism. And remember, like when JFK was elected, people would be like, is the Pope going to tell JFK what to do and all that kind of stuff? So how do you feel about the resolution of things with Tommen? Of course, he ends up killing himself. That's a famous meme, that shot of him walking out of the window.
Yeah.
And there's so many memes in this particular season that I totally forgot about. But what do you think about Tommen, his inability to kind of fight on his behalf? He's manipulated by Cersei. Cersei herself is on the outs. I love how the council kind of refuses to seat her and all of that, and then she flips the script on them, and you see that in the most dramatic way with the wildfire later on. But how to make sense of this for me a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it really starts with this whole thing in King's Landing over the course of season 6, Kyle. I think really starts with the High Sparrow always being a step or two ahead of everybody else. There's no fighting this guy. He's always a step or two ahead of Cersei. And even when they have the plan to bring the Tyrell army in and are actually going to fight and use force, it's already that, again, it's all due to the High Sparrow having already brought Tommen along to merge the crown and the faith. So he's already got Tommen. He's already got his hooks in Tommen. He's got the marionette strings in the king. So even a violent rebellion wouldn't have worked. So it's the High Sparrow is always a step ahead, and no one could get ahead of this guy. No one could figure out how to deal with him. And yeah, Tommen is just a character who doesn't have any conviction. You know, he doesn't have enough conviction. If he had a little more conviction, a little more anger, even just to free Marjorie, right? And a lot of that is due to Cersei still having her claws in Tommen. And I really like, it's a tragic thing, but all the plans and all the wheels that Cersei sets in motion just causes Tommen to kill himself. You know, again, he's kind of the type of character who's just not long for this world. He would never be an effective ruler in this type of climate, and he can't take it, you know? And it is interesting that Marjorie is plotting something. She's the only one who sort of takes control and sort of has the wheels in motion, and even realizes that Cersei has a plan. She's the one who, like, Cersei's not here. We need to get out of here. She's the one who realizes it. And then, of course, the High Sparrow realizes it. And then, of course, the giant wildfire explosion in the Sept, in the King's Landing Sept, which is crazy, which is a whole plot that Cersei and Qyburn put together in order to finally rid themselves of the Faith Militant. And that was going to be the only way to do it, and then I don't know what Cersei thought was going to happen with Tommen, but yeah, he wasn't long for this world, man.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the terror attack. First of all, I love the character of Qyburn. Like he's one of my favorite characters. I think the guy that plays him does a really nice job, but above and beyond that, because we don't see him very much, it's just a very shadowy, interesting, like I said, Nazi scientist type character that will do anything.
Well said.
In fact, he's the master of whisperers now. We meet some of his. That's a weird scene when he has the kids kill the other Meister.
Oh, Pycelle.
Yeah. I don't know what that was all about. I didn't. There was like some indication that the birds, like that Varys was always talking about, are in fact kids that he was kind of bribing children and all that. Right.
Yes.
So I don't know.
That's cool.
Yeah, which is super cool. But I don't know exactly like why the kids killed Pycelle or what that was, to what end. I didn't really get that. But as far as Qyburn kind of plotting this, we learn about the incredible amount of wildfire in or underneath the city during the fight with Stannis in the bay. And they're all surprised, or I guess most are surprised that this happened. And this is like remnants of like these mad scientists that had been working on behalf of the old king. And so they decided to use it. And there's really the cool stuff with Lancel when he sees like the candle burning underneath
cool.
And all of that in this massive explosion. It's worth saying that they don't only get rid of the Faith Militant, but they get rid of a lot of their political competition as well. They basically wipe out the Tyrells, with the exception of the House of the Lady of Thorns and all the rest. So they're getting a lot of different people. This really invokes what's a good example of where and what book this happens? I think it might happen in Homeland. There's also that Designated Survivor TV show where like there's a bombing of the House of Representatives or something during a joint session of Congress in which like you just wipe out everyone. I mean, that's why those things are so well guarded and stuff, because you could basically just cut the head off of the United States by bombing it. And of course, during the State of the Union, when a member of the cabinet needs to stay behind because of that. So that comes to fruition in that particular story. So it just reminded me a little bit of that, where they actually solve a lot of their goals, unfortunately for us, because we're rooting against them. They're the antagonists, I think.
It's a good point.
But they're able to kind of consolidate power in this major way, but they are isolated. I mean, it's clear before the terror attack, there's a conversation between Cersei and the Queen of Thorns, and she says, like, you have no friends, like, you're done, you know? And she somehow figures it out and somehow makes it happen. What did you think about the scene with Cersei, or Cersei? I can always say Cersei. I don't know how to say it. And because they're speaking British English too, so it's like hard.
That's
hard
true.
To
that complicates things.
How do you feel about her kind of getting revenge on the Septa? I'm glad that they got to show that, and the Mountain coming in and taking his helmet off, which is kind of cool. You see him just very briefly, and he looks normal in the back, but not in the front. I don't know
yeah.
But what did you make about that? That kind of like, a tone, and she's like, or what did she say? Not a tone. Or maybe she does say that as she's closing the door. Shame. I'm sorry, that's what it is. Shame. And she's closing the door really quietly, like shame.
Wow.
Good shit. What do you think of that?
Unbelievable, that torture scene. Starts with pouring wine on her and just kind of talking
meme.
shit. Yes. So funny. And the fact that she says she's ready for death, and she said, I'm not going to kill you today. I'm not going to kill you for a long time. And then sort of, let me ask you a question. Was the Mountain sexually assaulting her? Or was he just physically assaulting her?
I don't know. I don't even know what the insinuation really was. They kept showing her hands and shit like that, so I didn't know if he was going to like do something. But you only see him taking his helmet off and then like put like kind of his back to her as he's like doing something at a table. So I don't know what he was going to do. I mean, possibly because the Mountain is known to do that, right? Because we learned that from Oberyn,
right? So
maybe, which is horrifying. But yeah, it was like, because I don't know. Yeah, in a way, it's like, what do you can't. I mean, you can't feel that bad for that Septa. I mean, no, this is like where you're getting involved in antagonist upon antagonist, where you're like rooting for one or the other because you have to. They're all horrible. Right. And I like what Cersei says to her about, like, you don't give a fuck about atonement or me getting right with the gods. You enjoyed it. And I know that you enjoyed it because I enjoy it too. And that's some dark shit.
Good shit, man.
Like where the sociopath meets the sociopath.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I really dig that quite a bit.
Oh, Cersei.
Let's talk a little bit, Dig, about the Ironborn. They kind of don't get deep enough into this either, because we see them, first of all, the best castle of all the castles. I love that castle.
It's so cool.
And I love how just insane that these people are. Like, they're Balon is like just crazy. He doesn't give a fuck about anything. And I love, like, and it's raining and hurricaning or whatever, and he's just walking, like, just holding on to the rope bridge. But then his son comes and kind of just Aaron and kind of just kills him. And I'm like, this is happening so quickly. Why is this happening so quickly again? Because there are all of these different things we learn about the Ironborn, especially their governance, that I really like, at least I understood more after this season. I like that they get into how there is no succession. The people have to kind of vote in some way, or like the leaders of their various houses have to kind of vote. So there is no succession, and people can make their various claims. They never had a queen, although Yara, before the return of her brother, seems to be the favorite, and she becomes like a rebel with a rebel navy, which is super cool. But like, the death happens so quickly, his introduction happens so quickly. Theon's reintegration with Yara, and like they have one nice scene where we're at the brothel, and she's and that was cool and fun. But we don't really integrate them and kind of get to know them as brother or sister and their affections for each other or whatever. So I like that they ultimately split in half, and they both have their own goals, and now one's going to go with the Lannisters, one's going to go with Daenerys. But I love the imagery, the octopus, the water, the drowned god. I think I understood what the dead will never die. I mean, I knew that was their saying, but I never understood what they were doing. Did you get that after watching this season, that they're like, they dip you underwater until you are dead?
Oh yes, yeah.
And then that's why they say the dead can never die or whatever, which is super cool. So I didn't get that at all until I watched this particular season.
I don't think I did either.
That was lost on me. So that's super. And then they just wait for him to see if he's going to like cough up the water, or just die. That's dope as hell. I mean, that's so super cool. But I'm disappointed that they didn't kind of flesh this out again more. So I constantly complain here. Talk to me about the Iron Islands and their reintegration, Yara's kind of ascent, and all the rest.
Yeah, I mean, this Euron character comes out of nowhere. So I guess they kind of sort of backfill the story by saying he was out gallivanting or whatever, comes in and kills his brother, throws him off the rope bridge, and then sort of lays claim to the Salt Throne. And so, Yara's kind of making her move for it, and then he says, "It's like, who the hell is this guy?" Now, Euron will play a big part in the rest of the series, but certainly in season 7. But the character comes out of nowhere, and I love seeing Yara and Theon sort of dedicate themselves to align themselves with Daenerys and her host and her faction. It's actually kind of interesting because Daenerys does need the ships, and she does need some sort of an entree back into Westeros. So it's nice that it's a kind of a cool team up. The Ironborn is so fascinating. We're so fascinated with them. And so that was kind of cool. And again, seeing a kind of a cool mashup of Yara and Daenerys. I totally forgot about that. And Theon involved in the mix too was kind of neat. Theon and Tyrion sort of rekindling their bad blood from Theon making fun of him ages ago and all of that. So it's kind of cool to see those characters brush up against each other. And again, those mashups. It's kind of neat. And we'll get a lot more. We won't talk about Euron yet, but he'll have a big part to play down in King's Landing for sure.
I think he said something about giving you his big cock or whatever they said. Yeah, he just comes out of nowhere, like off the top rope. Someone, in my opinion, in storytelling, it's like, no, George, no more characters like of this consequence. It's over. We can introduce like all the players should be known. There shouldn't be just a player now, like another player. Right. I understand if the player comes from somewhere outside of Westeros and its places of control, because we don't really know what's going on with most of the world.
Right.
But like off the top rope. God.
I'm sure in the books they kind of they would probably allude to Euron. They probably talk about where he is and what he's doing. So, but in the show, it's like really out of the blue. I mean, maybe they mentioned him once prior or something.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some throwaway line. All right, so I like seeing, and I want to talk about it just briefly. We brought it up earlier, but we see vast Dothrak, the city of the Dothraki again, and they have what I love about this. And again, it's so quick because we see Jorah go into the city, and they're trying to like do all this stuff. That they don't carry weapons in the city. They get again into the mythology of these what are looked at as like savage heathens, but they don't carry weapons in their own capital city. And it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's peaceful. I'm sure it's not, but it's different. And when they find one of the guys' heads bashed in because they're trying to like hide a stab wound, and all of the rest, I liked seeing this. And it's cool to see Daenerys kind of get back with these people again, get a one over on them, kill all of the leadership basically. But it kind of brings in this and focus more, Dig, that Daenerys is bad. Like I think Stannis is pretty bad too, especially what he does to his own daughter and all of that. But on the whole spectrum, I feel like Daenerys and Cersei are like neck and neck. And we see that here, just massive death and being done to kind of free people from their chains, which is great. But I think I think the auspices of it are outweighed by this kind of just evil that she seems to portray, which is why I think it's so funny how many people name their kid like Daenerys or Khaleesi. I used to say on Kind of Funny all the time, I'm like, this person's going to end up being a bad guy. And lo and behold, they just couldn't resist. For some reason, your kid has the name of a psychopath. What do you think about the reintroduction of the Dothraki? And we talked a little bit about it earlier with the widows, but is it cool? Like, do you welcome them finally crossing the what do they call it? The Black Sea or something, whatever they name it. They're scared of it and all of that. Much like the wildlings we're finally really get to see them in previous seasons and their integration into Westeros. These characters are now going to intersect with Westeros as well. So do you have any interest in seeing them?
Yeah, it was cool. That was one of the great things that I lamented with Daenerys, all the legwork she put in the beginning with Khal Drogo and the first Dothraki horde, that she never got any of that, that none of that was able to be carried over like the Unsullied or something like that, or the Second Sons. So it's nice now that she has these blood riders as part of building her army. And it's also really cool what you said about Daenerys, that she does show those sort of crazy attributes, those crazy Targaryen, like her dad. She shows a little bit of that insanity and the bloodlust and just that craziness. She's already showing those qualities a little bit. And of course, that's going to play out again. We'll see that before the end. But she definitely does show glimpses of that already. And you really wonder. And as you said, she's doing that under the guise of freeing slaves and being the breaker of chains and all of that. But there's still something not quite right about the way she's conducting herself. And I like that they're already showing us glimpses of that. They're already kind of alluding to the fact that she's kind of off her rocker a little bit.
In the books, I think they say this. I don't know if it's clear in the show, but I think they talk about Daenerys like the Targaryens are totally incestual. And I don't know if that's portrayed in the show or not. I don't really remember, but they are in the book. Like they literally openly, I think. I don't think I'm making it up, are totally incestual. That's why they have the hair and like all this shit, like the very specific things that aren't worked out in your genetic code, because your DNA is literally half your mom, half your dad. So if you're just, keeping it in the family, as it were. So I think I think that's something they say. So that could explain the craziness. I'm not to be rude, but it's like that could explain the craziness.
Absolutely.
That they all share. All right. I want to discuss a couple of specific scenes or specific arcs that are smaller, but I think relevant and interesting. I want to talk about Sam going back to Riverrun, and we meet his family. Lord Tarly of Horn Hill. And he's on his way to become a maester for the Men in Black. But there's a real contrast here between the mom and sister, who are very warm, and then the dad, who's just a fucking douchebag straight up. And the brother, who, we don't really get to know him. He seems fine. But Sam is an annoying character sometimes, but this is like, I remember this happening as it was happening. I'm like, oh yeah, we get to go and see his family. It's quite satisfying because it kind of shows you that you think that Sam in reality was this doughy, and he is this doughy dude who couldn't do anything and is kind of backwards or whatever. And maybe his family was right that they were so hard on him or whatever, but you kind of get to know him. And then he's put back into that old situation and you realize, no, this dude was just these people had it out against him, like straight up, or at least his dad did. And it's sad.
Right.
So what do you make of that particular scene and kind of the resolution of seeing the family and them stealing the sword of Valyrian steel and all the rest?
It's so sad because we know, just from having a little bit of Sam's background prior, that Randall Tarly, his dad, is the one who kind of banished him to the wall. And I think felt like Sam was a disgrace. But you know what's interesting about that? It's like, if you have a son who you would love to be a really good football player, but is just a high honor roll student and gets straight A pluses, can't you just recognize that that's their talent? Like, why would you disown them just because they're not good at the thing you want them to be good at or whatever?
It's strange.
It's very strange. And you can't recognize like the fact that he's not a coward. Just because he's not a fighter or a warrior doesn't mean he's not a coward. And it was cool to see a glimpse of Sam's, where he comes from. This is a proper family, a well-to-do family, of really high-born standing. But his father just out and out rejects him and just cannot acknowledge Sam's good qualities. So it's kind of sad, but Sam is on this track. He's going to be a Maester. He's going to go to the Citadel. He's going to go back to Castle Black eventually and serve as a Maester there, where, kind of where his heart is. But it is interesting because his dad is such a complete prick, and now we finally get to meet him. And it's nice that Sam takes the sword. He takes the Valyrian steel sword too.
Yeah, good for you.
As a fuck you.
Now, Dig, I'm finally pleased to get to the most important topic, which of course is Lady Lyanna Mormont.
Oh.
Now, welcome to Bear Island, by the way. She's awesome. I mean, I was waiting for this character. I knew because we get a letter from her, I think 2 seasons before, when she's like, I only know the Starks as the kings of the North or whatever. And
right.
this is played by Bella Ramsey, who I said, I think an episode ago, is going to play Ellie in The Last of Us on HBO. So that'll be interesting.
Oh, that's so cool.
This is her when she was younger. And of course, Oberyn is playing Joel. So an interesting little connection there.
Very cool.
But I just fucking love this character. And I love the hierarchy that suggests that she does belong there in her own particular family, the Mormonts. Of course, she's related to Jorah, which is cool. But that everyone seems to respect her when they're at Castle Black, and she kind of stands up and kind of like owns some of the dudes. Been like, you didn't heed the call, House Clover. You didn't heed the call, whatever. And they did with only 62 men. And she says something like, they each fight with the ferocity of 10 mainlanders and all. But she's just great. And I think it's such a clever idea, and it invokes that Purim and Palom kind of quality. She's a little older, but we've said before in Final Fantasy IV, what's so fucking cool about Purim and Palom, the twin mages, is that they're 6.
Right.
They're 6. And they're in like these crazy battles, like casting magic. And you can kind of imagine what that might be like and what they look like, what they're like. And they're children. They're like little kids. And she's just a few years older than them. And she's in this very adult situation and seems to have a good grasp on it. I think it's quite charming and a really good idea. And I'm wondering what you thought of Lady Mormont.
Oh, it's so cool. It's so cool to see this precocious little kid that's a leader of a house, and her courage and her conviction and her wisdom for a 10 or 11-year-old little girl. And, she is integral in Jon being credited or crowned as the White King, as the king in the North. Because the other houses, even after the Battle of the Bastards, the other houses are kind of hemming and hawing. And she's the one who stands up and says, like, this is the guy. And then all the other houses fall in line after her. So to see this little 10-year-old, 11-year-old girl commanding that level of respect is really cool. And she's the real deal, that it would have been cool to see her at the battle.
Yeah, no, totally. She's there. I think there is a couple of shots with her where she's like on horseback or whatever. But I agree. Like, it's super. I just love that character. I just think it's a really cool idea.
So fun.
Not only that, because like little boy would be different. We see little boys. We see Robin, for instance, a little bit in this,
sure.
And he's fucking so awkward. I don't know if that kid is that awkward or if he's playing him just so well. And when he runs and hugs Littlefinger when he comes back, I'm like, what in the hell? I don't know if he's just a really good actor or whatever. But all right, so as we move forward, I want to first focus in on, I guess, the Lannisters and the Freys and Blackfish and everything that's going on with them. What do you make of the conflict that they have and kind of the inevitability, it seems, of the Freys' downfall? They've kind of burned through their friends. And I guess what I want to ask you about that specifically is, it's another situation where it's like, who do you even root for? It's like the Freys and the Lannisters suck, but Blackfish kind of sold out his son. The son didn't really do anything, and he refuses to kind of like at first lay down his castle and save his men's lives. And he goes down swinging, which is cool. And I love that scene where he's like, he takes his sword out. He's like, I haven't a good sword fight in years. Something like that. What do you make of that whole arc?
It was interesting to see the Blackfish come back. And again, something I completely forgot about. And the fact that Riverrun was all of a sudden in the mix. And this, crazy. I mean, we knew that the Freys and the Lannisters via the Red Wedding were already aligned and they already had some sort of alliance going together via Tywin before his death. But then this whole thing where Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, is the one, he escaped from the Red Wedding and then sort of holes himself up in Riverrun, that I was confused why they needed Riverrun. Like, why did they, it seemed like unimportant. It didn't seem like
to the Lannisters or to the
Lannisters / Freys. Like, why did they need, what was the key component of Riverrun?
Yeah, right? I'm missing that too.
It seems small or insignificant. But I might be missing it. And that whole thing too with Edmure Tully, Kat's brother, and the fact that there's this, that these characters you forgot about from seasons 2, season 3, and that there's still this animosity brewing, these grudges brewing, and that Jaime, as the head of the Lannister part of it, is sort of disgusted with everybody involved, and it considers them beneath him, which is I don't know, kind of comical. Good for some comic relief in this bit.
I also want to ask about the whole Bran arc. He, it's just I'm sorry, not Bran.
The Hound.
The Hound, yeah. I'm sorry, not Bran. The whole Hound arc with the evangelists. The quote I was thinking about earlier about violence was actually the evangelist that they were working with. That's who said it. He says violence is a disease. And I imagine again in the books that this would be much better fleshed out, but I love the idea of the Hound having to escape or trying to escape from violence as a way of life and finding his peace and getting away from it. And they say over and over again, it's never too late to come back. Like it's never too late to do good deeds. I think the Brotherhood says that to him later on too, when he sees them, because he takes revenge on these guys that kill all the people that he was trying to get with. And I find the sadness and I'm wondering if you share it too. And just the sadness in he tries to get away. Like he tries to find a different way forward. He's not even hiding who he is. Like they know who he is.
Yeah.
It's just that he wants to like turn over a new leaf and do good, or at least try to explore that. And it's kind of sad because he's dragged back in. Like it's almost as the world expects him to be this way. When he settles into some normalcy, the world brutalizes it for him. And I don't know. What do you make about that whole arc? I wish again, it would have been nice to feel it more and get more time with him in the solitude. He's alive and he's trying to do something different.
Yeah, it's nice to see the Hound again. He's left for dead after the battle with Brienne, and Arya kind of leaves him for dead. And it's said that this Brother Ray character, Ian McShane, we were just evoking his name in a recent podcast. He pops up in this one episode as Brother Ray, who's this former mercenary / cutthroat who's now dedicated his life to the faith of the Seven. He's a sept, so in service, and he's got these followers, and he wants to build this. He's attempting to build this sept with his followers in the Riverlands, and it's said that it's intimated that he's the one who found the Hound and nursed him back to health, and now the Hound is sort of helping them out, building this church essentially. And yeah, that whole thing of evoking that same message as Beric and Thoros of, it's never too late to do more harm, do more good than harm. It's never too late to reform. And just in this one episode, it's just sort of this compact box episode with this one Brother Ray character. And it's true, though, the Hound has some sort of tragic default that he always goes back to, that, that basically some errant Brotherhood, Brotherhood Without Banners members come and basically terrorize them and kill all the followers and hang Brother Ray, and the Hound can't do anything about it. He's out collecting wood or whatever, and he comes back and everybody's murdered, everybody's dead. And then, of course, finds Beric and Thoros, and they have the guys, and they're about to hang them. So the Hound could join in on that. But I guess it's also saying that those were some of Beric and Thoros' men, right? That kind of flew off on their own.
That's what it seems like, or at least they're under the ruling, like the Brotherhood Without Banners
right
rules that area. So their
right.
way of life or whatever. Yeah, because there's that scene where the Hound goes and like fucks those guys up at that campsite first, which is awesome.
Right.
And yeah, I really dig. I dig the nuance to this character. He's said like in previous seasons, I think he's talking to Arya about how he got the burn on his face, and he says that he talks about how the mountain put his face in the fire, but then he says she asks like why, and he's like, I stole one of his toys, or like he thinks I stole one of his toys, but I didn't. So like he wasn't his brother and was kind of made to be this like monstrous character over time and put into these situations and then embraced it. It's not to say he's not like he's not good, but there was good in him, and it was cool to see them kind of try to tease that out, and then it just being taken away from him. And it's a bummer. You know, I love the Brotherhood without banners. Those are my guys. I love those guys. But especially Beric. I mean, we all know that the Flaming Sword is the fucking best. And we haven't seen the last of the Flaming Sword, of course. But it's just, yeah, teasing that out even over the season would have been nice. Like maybe they get the Sept kind of built a little bit, and they're living off the land. And
yeah,
I don't know why in my mind, because I didn't really remember exactly what happened. I'm like, are they going to put him in a position where he has to fight on their behalf? Because that's kind of what they expect out of him, which would have been even sadder, in fact. But it didn't end up happening like that. Or in other words, where they were going to be like, yeah, of course this fucking, you know, lunkhead is going to carry a sword and a shield for us and fight on our behalf and kill these people for us. I don't know why I thought that that's how it happened, but it didn't. So there's that as well. But I want to get into some of the bigger things here that we have to wrap up. And let's talk about the Battle of the Bastards. Papa Fridge wrote in and said, hello to the brothers M. What were your initial reactions to the Battle of the Bastards? When I first saw it, I couldn't believe I was watching something on television. The scale of the battle, while keeping with Jon throughout, is a masterclass in portraying two armies fighting it out while staying with an individual hero. To me, I put it up there with some of my favorite army battles in cinema. Again, even though it is only an HBO show. Yeah, and only an HBO show is a compliment, I think, because HBO does awesome shows. But this battle is amazing. There are so many interesting shots of Jon. I would love to slow them down and watch them to see what's real and what's not. But like, while guys are like running towards him, and someone like on a horse like runs the guy over, and he like turns around and stabs a dude, and the camera's just staying with him. Really sophisticated filmmaking as the bodies are piling up behind them, and they're fighting over all of the bodies and all the rest. And like you said earlier, with Rickon getting shot. By the way, do you think that Ramsay was missing Rickon on purpose those first few shots? Yeah, okay, definitely. Yeah, that's what I assumed.
For sure.
So, yeah, what do you make of the Battle of the Bastards? Take it however you'd like. The 9th episode and a really important and well-loved episode of the show.
Man, I mean, it's such a showcase scene because, first of all, you're waiting for Ramsay to get dealt with. And you're waiting for Jon you're waiting for Jon versus Ramsay. But this battle feels so cinematic, and the scale is absolutely right. The brutality, the level of violence, the powerful presentation, the blood and the dirt, and the weight of those horses, and the force of the strikes. You could feel it. It's palpable. And it almost feels like a little movie inside of Game of Thrones, the handheld camera. And just, it feels so real and so dire. And just the ferocity and the frenzy and sort of there's no rhyme or reason. It's just complete chaos. And the claustrophobia later with Jon on the trying to get, stay on top of the pile of bodies and gasping for air, and the way that's handled with the dirty camera lens and the fact that they'll fog over the camera or fade the sound. It's really beautifully done. And we haven't seen anything like this in Game of Thrones so far over the course of the show so far. So it was really, really powerful and brutal, and makes you so nervous watching, so much tension, and for a proper payoff. And then also the way the Umbers fight with the shields and the spears and sort of close in, and it seemed like all is lost. And then of course the Riders of the Vale come through and change the tide of the battle. So the way it's stepped out, it really is as good as any great war movie. I mean, feels like as brutal as the opening fight scene in Private Ryan. Just really brutal, no holds barred, no punches pulled, just shows the chaos, really the chaos of battle. Jon's thanking the one dude, and the dude just gets shot in the face with an arrow. Unbelievable.
Yeah, very Spielbergian,
Saving
Private Ryan type shit. Because there's that scene in Saving Private Ryan where like he turns over on the beach and like pulls one of the guys to radio, and the guy just is like decapitated or whatever, and he just
horrific. It just shows the horror of
exactly
that. There's nothing glossed over. There's nothing sweet about it.
Completely senseless. It's totally, I couldn't agree more. Like the revisitation of violence in the show over and over again just shows how senseless it is, especially at scale. It's just, I keep thinking about these various characters that you see, these ill-equipped farmers and peasants or whatever, and it's like it just really brings up the question of like, how did situations like this really happen? Because they really did for many hundreds of years, and I just, it's just so senseless and stupid when you really think about it. Just people killing people for no reason.
It's crazy. And you know what they do a great job of in this, Kyle, especially the opening of the battle, that it's directionless. It's not north and south. Like there's horses coming from the west, from the east. It's just like friend, foe, you're all mixed up. Ramsay's firing volleys of arrows into his own men. Like it's complete pandemonium. And they do such a good job of that. Like you get so turned around. Like you even wonder like how Jon could identify friend from foe and all of that. It's really beautifully done.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a stark contrast to battles later on in that are horrible. And we'll talk about them when we get to them. But this is the exact opposite of that. I love the when the Riders of the Vale come in and you see a real distance shot and they're just basically running over the columns, like just destroying them with their horses and their armor and all this. I also want to give a shout out to a lesser degree because we don't see as much about it, but the siege at Meereen from the slavers, really cool shots of the ships like throwing these flaming projectiles. It's very, very cool. And they take them out of these like packed packages, very carefully place them in and light them on fire and launch them. A lot of cool scenes there, and the pyramid getting kind of bombarded as they're trying to figure out their move. So I wanted to give a shout out to that as well. We have to talk, though, about the Winds of Winter. It's the final episode. Casey Me wrote in and said, in my opinion, the Winds of Winter is the greatest 60 minutes of TV ever. To follow up the hype of the Battle of the Bastards with that episode was the stuff of legends. It truly feels like that's when Game of Thrones peaked. So much hype during those 2 weeks. Thank you, Casey, for writing in. So a lot happens here, and we've talked a little bit about some of it. Of course, it all centers around this terror attack on the Sept and the destruction of the Faith Militant, as well as a lot of politicos, let's say. Some other smaller things happen that kind of quickly happen, though, too. Like one of the cool scenes here is a white raven arrives from the Citadel and marks the winter has officially begun. And we have different people trying to make different, the Tyrells are in Dorne trying to figure things out. Arya returns and kills Walder Frey. Jon Snow, like we said, with the Mormont girl and others, becomes the White Wolf. And Cersei somehow becomes autocrat, and Queen Daenerys finally begins crossing the sea. There's a lot of different things to visit as Tommen commits suicide following the attack and all the rest. Pycelle, like we already said, is killed. And I'm curious what you make of this episode, because it is so dense, and this is the really quality stuff that I do love from Game of Thrones. Although again, when you're talking about each of these things, it's like, man, that could have been its own episode almost. And so that's my one frustration, because everything just kind of happens. But
it does.
But nonetheless, it's fun. So what do you make of it?
Yes, Cersei claims the Iron Throne. There's no one else left except her and Jaime and Qyburn and the Mountain.
Right.
And man, can we just give a shout out to Wildfire? I mean, that green, fiery blast, like green napalm. It's such a cool visual. Super scary. It's interesting that Cersei's plan went, obviously involved the death of many and thereby taking out a lot of her opponents or would-be opponents, but also results in the death of her only remaining child. Even Cersei can't control the levels of insanity when it comes to her plans and death when it comes to her plans. And then I really like that you say that, when they're attacking Meereen and the slavers are attacking Meereen with their ships, it's cool to see how other civilizations in this world fight, the way they fought with those flaming devices on their boats and their launchers that they had and all that kind of stuff. It's really neat to see the different factions and how they fight and what they fight with and their tools and their ships and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, Daenerys is equipped. She's got the Unsullied, she's got her Blood Riders, she's got her 3 dragons, she's got a massive fleet of ships. I mean, that fleet of ships is tremendous, absolutely tremendous. She's got a lot of those are Ironborn ships. So, and she's coming to wreck shop in Westeros now, which is, it's crazy. We've been waiting for 6 seasons for Daenerys to come back to Westeros, and it looks like she's finally coming that way. And and of course the Starks reclaim Winterfell. The wolf banners are unfurled once again.
Indeed. And another thing they say about Winterfell in the books that I thought was interesting was they build the castle over a natural heated water, like a spring. And
cool.
So it's like quite comfortable apparently in the castle, and you never really see that in the show. They like never really portray that. They portray the harshness of the North, but in the show it's a little bit different, or in the book it's portrayed a little bit different. What did you make about Arya confronting Walder Frey? I like that scene specifically. She's slowly getting the names off of her list and doing what she said she was going to do. So what do you make of her return? I like that specifically.
I mean, we always think of Walder, right, as the one. He's the guy. He was the guy at the Red Wedding. He's the complete instigator. So that's the one you want to see dealt with. And yeah, she comes and apparently carves his two sons up into food, into dinner, and then takes care of him, slices his throat, reveals herself first, which is interesting. Says, I'm going to be smiling over you. The last thing you're going to see is a Stark, as you're gasping for air, you're gasping your last breaths. And so we finally get that payoff. Walder Frey is finally taken out, my friend.
And there's that weird scene with Littlefinger and Sansa where he's kind of trying to get with her again.
Yeah, what's going on there?
But he's double and triple crossing too much to like have any expectations that people are gonna to want to deal with him. So that's a little strange. And yeah, so I agree. And Cersei, like, it's like this is what I'm so curious about, is like, how is she queen? Like, how hasn't this just collapsed now? That's the one unrealistic part of it, in my opinion, is like, how have you consolidated power with so few people of any consequence?
Right.
It just seems like this would be a good point. This would not be the way it would go. Like that, you would be gone. There would still be a lot of other problems, but she's hanging on to power for dear life. And then of course we said Jon Snow comes the White Wolf. We already know that, and we do see the Tyrells and Dorne trying to get together with them. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to as we get into the seventh season. Is there anything that we didn't bring up that you wanted to touch on? There was one just scene I wanted to mention briefly that I love, is when when Lancel tries to come and arrest Cersei, and the Mountain like literally just pulls that dude's head off like a top.
Oh man.
And they just like they retreat or whatever. I love that scene. So I just wanted to give a shout out to that. But otherwise, I feel like I've been pretty thorough. I don't know that there's much more I want to say, but is there anything that we didn't touch on?
You know what? The one cool thing was the tragedy of Loras sort of giving his sort of crossing over and actually dedicating himself to the Faith Militant right before they're all killed in the Sept. But that was a tragic thing where he was actually giving in. Marjorie was sort of had bigger plans and she was pretending to abide, but Loras actually was broken by the High Sparrow and the Faith Militant. And that was a tragic ending for him, where he's getting branded, he's getting the symbol carved into his head right before he died. And they really broke that character. And I liked Loras, so I was sorry to see that. And the other thing I would give a shout out to, Kyle, is just Sam at the Citadel when he goes and in the library, he's in his glory. He gets to see all those books and all those levels of information and, all of this stuff that he's going to dedicate his life to. Now he's in, Sam is in his element.
Indeed.
In the Citadel. And that was very Harry Potter-esque for me, the shape of the building and the way the people in the well, they only deal with the one guy, but he's kind of highfalutin and rude and all that kind of stuff, and won't allow Gilly and the baby Sam in there and stuff like that.
Right.
But that was cool. That was a nice payoff for Sam at the end there.
Well, fair enough. Well, we'll get to season 7 and season 8 in the coming weeks. Of course, all this is available on HBO Max if you want to go watch it for yourself. And I know a lot of people are enjoying these episodes, so I thank you for your kindness on that, as everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people are kind of working their way through again alongside us.
It's a fun journey.
Yeah,
it's
it is,
my friend.
Definitely. I look forward to recording the next one. So, but Dave, let's end this episode like we do each episode with a dad joke. Are you prepared?
I am prepared, my friend. And then this one's come up from a few different people, but then I realized I don't think I've ever read it. So it's a video game dad joke. This one comes from CJ Armstrong, our friend. Kyle, Did you know Mortal Kombat is based on an old Scandinavian church song? It's a Finnish hymn. It's a Finnish hymn.
Just awful. Just awful. Just like Mortal Kombat. Hate. All right, Dave. Well, that was wonderful.
That was fun.
All right. Well, that's it. That's all we have for Knockback. It's 95 degrees here, so I'm gonna go and.
Is it really?
Yeah. So I'm gonna go and.
Holy shit!
Dip in the pool. I think.
Yeah, man. Go dunk your boys in the pool.
Yeah, I think I will. But thank you, as always, Dave, for your time. We appreciate you, and we appreciate all of you out there for your love, kindness, and support of our show and all things Last Stand Media. Patreon.com/Last Stand Media. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Knockback, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. Knockback's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including Knockback, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.